Welcome to this week's Network Roundtable. Things are a little different this week. Earlier this morning, I broadcast live from here at Westminster College, a whole thing on LinkedIn, and didn't have time to move back to the office. So here I am, live from LinkedIn's headquarters. Yeah. Anyway, we also don't have my regular partner, sidekick, partner in crime here. Stephanie Sims is MIA. Class is, there's a poster that'll tell you what room it's in. I think it's 103. They had to move the class. They're redoing the LinkedIn presentation this afternoon. So it's off in another class. We'll have people interrupting.
Did somebody walk in thinking you're talking to yourself?
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then after they thought I was talking to myself, then they thought that when I was explaining to the audience why somebody had come in, she said thank you 2 more times, thinking I was continuing to tell her what I had already told her. I really think
Awesome.
I'm losing it.
That's awesome. That's really, really good.
Yeah, Dennis doesn't do polished. He just does whatever happens. All right, so on Network Roundtable, David and Theodora, a tradition that we have is to let you guys each intro the other. So what we're going to do is we're going to let one of you, and you guys can
Is this a new tradition? Because nobody told me.
No, this has been around for a while. Basically the whole season, David. So
Oh, really?
yeah, we're going to put you on the spot. I'm sorry, this week, David, you have not gotten the prep you normally would because, well, here's the thing. Stephanie Sims is the organized one in this partnership, and I'm the creative.
Fair enough.
Stephanie is missing in action. So, yeah, sorry I didn't give you all the information.
Oh, no problem. It's not a problem. I was only joking. I know Theodora, so it's fine.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. One of you is going to tell us why you wanted to, have each other on this show, and then the other one. So you're going to just basically love all over each other and tell the world why you think the other one is absolutely amazing superhero sidekick. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go first. Because, okay, very quick introduction. When you asked me to bring somebody into this, and talking about humility, I mean, there's an inherent irony in all this, right? Because we're talking about humility, and perhaps we could say that we are not the most suitable to do that the moment we start talking about it. But talking about humility is a difficult subject. It's difficult at a personal level, and it's even harder to do at a business level because it becomes a lot more granular and a lot more complicated. So it's always difficult finding perhaps the perfect person to contribute to this kind of conversation. And when you said we needed somebody else, the natural choice that popped into my mind is Theodora. And I'll tell you why. Although she'll never admit it, she's really, really good at what she does. Absolutely brilliant. She gets the web, she gets semantic search, she gets SEO, she brings a very reasoned philosophical argument to the conversation always. Plus she speaks Latin, which I absolutely love. And she, as a person, she's really humble. She really is. And we'll explain in a bit what exactly being humble means, because it doesn't mean not being aware of your own abilities or your own expertise or your own perhaps influence on other people, but it does mean that you take what you do very seriously, but you don't take yourself very seriously. And I think that's a very healthy approach to doing anything, and she's brilliant at it. So there you go. That's why I chose her.
Perfect. Theodora.
Okay, how do I take the floor after that one? Well, why am I here with David? First, because he so politely asked for that. Second, because one of the surest way to get to David is to jump in an HOA with him, because he's always on an HOA. And on a more serious note, because David is one of the the most insightful people whom I've ever met. I know this sounds a bit cliche, but it's true. And what else? He has influenced me in a very interesting way because he's the person from whom I've learned to stay cool, again, not to take myself seriously, and to work very hard to get what I want and to change the world. Is this enough?
That is perfect. Thank you so
Okay.
much. And I think David's smile said it all with that. All right, so David, let's start off with you kind of alluded to wanting to get into a definition of humility. Let's start right there.
Okay, let's humility is one of those relatively hard things to define. Unlike trust, which is a very hard definition, which comes to no relational exchange taking place if there is no trust there. When it comes to humility, we have a very ambivalent relationship with it, particularly in the West, where we expect those who are experts at it to basically have the kind of confidence which exudes that. And we expect the same thing at a personal level as at a business level. And naturally enough, because of the depersonalized approach which we have had for most of the 20th century, all of it, really, when it comes to businesses, there's a marked lack of humility in terms that most businesses would, the bigger they get, the more they project that image, and the more they act with a kind of attitude. So we ask, well, what is humility? We expect somebody at a personal level to not perhaps project themselves to the degree where they say, I'm the greatest, and they allow what they do and the way they do it to actually speak for that. And it's exactly the same when it comes to businesses. We basically expect a business which has humility, which is perhaps humble, not to not know how good it is, not to not know how to do its job, or have the confidence to actually establish its position. But we definitely expect it to focus on what it does rather than who does it. Ultimately, whether we're individuals or whether we're businesses, we are replaceable. There's no one who's so great that cannot be gone tomorrow and forgotten 3 days later. So really, when it comes to the value that you project and the value that you create, it has to be in what you do. And that is deadly serious. You really put a lot of effort into that, take a lot of pride in what you do, really work hard to generate the kind of approach and contact that generates value at every point of your journey. But that shouldn't become the label behind which you hide, either as a business or as a person. And that is the very loose definition, and very broad, I admit, of humility, which is what we're actually trying to define tonight.
Theodore, do you have any thoughts you want to add to what David's just said?
Well, I just wanted to enter with a thing I was thinking about when David told me we're going to talk about humility. And I was trying to approach it philosophically. And I came to the conclusion that if business is exchange, you cannot exchange if you think you have nothing to take. So if you are not practicing humility, you're not letting yourself change. It's a bit short and dense, but this is what I got.
I love that, because that's part of the evolution, really, isn't it? I mean, whether it's a personal level or business level, if we don't exercise humility, it means that we don't think we can learn anything from any kind of situation or perhaps any kind of person we meet. And we know for a fact that we actually learn all the time. If we're people, every contact we have whether it's from someone who knows more than us or less than us. We actually learn from that contact, and we become better in the process. And the same thing should be happening in a business. Business learns from every win, it learns from every loss, it learns from every customer. Unless it has an attitude, and if it does, then it is impossible for it to learn, because it starts from the assumption that it is right, therefore everybody else must be wrong. And we see it in customer service all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and that's one of the major differences between self-confidence with humility and without, is what you just described. Because I don't think you can be truly humble without being self-aware. And yet you can't allow that self-awareness to make you think that everything that you say or do is the gospel. You must be
so true. If you're in G+, I think it's very difficult to get to that level because you get challenged at every step.
Especially this week, right? I don't know what it
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've had, oh my gosh, what is going on conversations about this particular week, and how ironic it is that we've had humility on the slate since May, and we've had, David, you have been selected since late June or early July to discuss this subject today, and certainly in my experience to date, there hasn't been a Friday that isn't more fitting to be talking about the balance that is necessary to achieve humility.
Yes, it's been a
And
challenging week.
let me make it clear, I'm not jumping in the fray, I'm not calling people out. All I'm saying is, we're all awesome, let's just understand the power of semantic search and how we all benefit by everybody else's strengths and weaknesses. This isn't a calling out.
Yes.
It
did. Well, there you go. I mean, you're right. It's been quite a challenging week. I've only dipped in and out of G Plus because I had a lot of meetings this week. But every time I was in a stream, there was always some heated conversation going on. And there are probably a lot of reasons for that. I think one is that the space is maturing from a certain perspective. There are people who have been here for some time and they're very conversant in it. And a lot of new people are coming in and they're bringing in their own ideas and their own preconceptions. And I think it's typical in terms of the mix of, we're getting a little bit of new and a little bit of old. And new, of course, means new to this environment. It doesn't mean that those coming in don't have experience or knowledge. They do. And they're also very passionate and they bring in their own preconceptions into it. And the entire strength of the enterprise, the entire strength of the medium is going to be proved in how we actually handle this. And I think, and I include myself in this, at the moment we're all handling it very badly. We are getting a little bit overworked, a little bit over emotional, and conversations become derailed. It tends to be a little bit our way or the highway, and our way is what we've always had so far, and we're confident and comfortable with it. And any newcomer is really given a little bit of a cold shoulder. And I think we have a lot to learn from this. And this week has been very instructive for very many people, I hope, myself included. Because we can see the dynamic changing, we can see G Plus growing. We need to grow and evolve with it. Theodora said quite rightly that there's no contact we can't learn from, and that is a very hard definition of humility. If we can't learn from these contacts and grow, then we shouldn't expect G Plus to grow much further in terms of its ability to help us learn and mature and evolve. And I think it has a lot of potential to do that. So this is yet another step in the entire platform and ourselves, how we evolve. It's also a lesson on how businesses evolve. Businesses tend to be very risk adverse, which means they don't like change. They get to a certain comfortable point, and then the defenses go up. They say, okay, we're going to become this, and we're going to stay this and fight off newcomers, fight off change, fight off challenges. But in doing that, you refuse to grow, you refuse to evolve. The blinkers come down, you don't see what you don't see, which means that the threat which will challenge you is the one which you haven't seen coming because you haven't been able to spot and you're not prepared for. So suddenly, what should logically become the next evolution to deal with, next evolutionary step, becomes a critical challenge, which may kill or completely destroy a business.
Yeah, it takes a lot of strength to practice humility. And I was thinking that humility is like for big companies or for somehow for people who have larger, say, audience or impact. And this is the stage where they should start practicing humility. Why am I saying this? Because I want to show you something I stumbled upon today.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure, do you see this?
Yep, I can see it, yep.
Yep.
Okay, that's the 1999, I think, version of Google's search engine.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this exclamation mark is practicing humility?
It could be just surprise. The surprise they're up.
Yeah, Dennis Sullivan shared this. So I thought that the bigger you grow, the more humility you are to learn and practice.
Yes.
And I think that's a good point because, back in 1999, Google's less than a year old when this particular logo came out. And since then, as a company, they're probably quite self-effacing because they're constantly changing. I've been reading Eric Smith's book, How Google Works, and they constantly challenge themselves. They have a very fluid working environment.
Mm-hmm.
They do what they take. They do what they do. They take that very seriously, but then they create the environment and the conditions which don't allow anyone to feel that they're bigger or better than all the rest. The managers and the staff have the same privileges, same corner offices. They're all squeezed into little environments, rubbing shoulders with each other. It allows them to feel that sense of discomfort is equal across everybody, and it becomes both the uniting thread across everything they do, and also it allows them to connect at a very personal level. So although they have different job descriptions, although they have different titles, and arguably different pay grades, they do the same job in many ways. They connect at the same level. Everybody can challenge everybody. Anybody can challenge anybody. So I think that's, if we're looking for a sense of humility in a massive workplace that is the dominant tech company in the world at the moment, well, there you go. There's a practical example.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Gore, the Gore-Tex people is another company with a great example. And I bring that up because the School of Business here at Westminster is actually the Bill and Vive Gore School.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, there's a direct tie between what the school is teaching here, which is very ethereal, non-traditional business in its MBA program. And that's because of the funding that comes from them. But every single person from the top to the bottom of the Gore Industries has the same thing on their business card, associate. No one has
That's right. It's called Gore-Tex Associates.
Yeah.
And there's only 150 people to every branch they open.
Yep. And if it starts getting close to 150, they separate it.
Open another one.
Another one. Yeah. So, I think there's some things that we certainly can learn from that and the examples of humility, that are given by some of the large companies. At the same time, we can look at the banking industry, and David, you and I have had this conversation a number of times, and the whole Occupy movement, if people would have backed off on their brands and opened their doors and been more transparent, then that movement would have never gotten strength. And it got strength simply because it was lack of humility. So, that brings up an interesting thought. If you're getting attacked, probably not a bad idea to sit back and go, what truth is there to this? Internally, but I mean, just a thought, throwing it out there. Am I off base?
Well, I think the moment you use the word attacked, the immediate reaction to this is defend, right?
Yes.
I think, and the moment somebody defends, they can't be analytical about anything really, let alone take a step back and critically think about the situation. But I mean, the reason, and the moment you mentioned the banking industry, we live in a world where we have now the data to actually analyze a lot of things which we couldn't in the past. And that data is accessible to everybody. It's not locked any longer into silos. It's not controlled by gatekeepers. We can all see the environments and the effect they have and the reasons they have these things and why things happen. So the moment that something like this happens, I think all of us need to take a step back and understand the conditions, the environment, the reasons, what led to it, and then find the common ground. How can we move forward from that? Getting into a stalemate where somebody attacks and somebody defends, well, that's a zero-sum game at some point. And zero-sum games, although you win a lot in the short term, long term you always lose because you're only setting yourself up for the next zero-sum game when the next contender will come along. Historically, we've had that kind of situation for a very long time, and it hasn't really helped us progress very far. We're in the 21st century. We can actually see that the cooperative game has a long-term strategy. We all want pretty much the same things. We want to survive. We want to have comfort zone, some kind of buffer, a sense of security, find some happiness and find meanings in our lives. And we all want that irrespective of where we are in the world or what we do or how we do it. Finding that kind of awareness is perhaps one of the reasons why we're having this discussion. If we can have this kind of humility in our essence as people and as businesses, then we are able to move forward at a measured pace, which leads to many different outcomes than the ones we're seeing at the moment. Admittedly, this is not easy. We're hardwired to respond in a certain way. If you attack, I'll defend, rather than think, wait a minute, why is he attacking? Can we talk it out? Why don't I buy you a beer? We discussed this.
Exactly. So I've got a couple of comments I want to bring up here. I thought this one was pretty funny.
I've met Yasin.
You have in Paris, if I remember right.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. Please mention me, Dennis Deuce, without any humility.
Okay, I'll say he's great, and I mean it actually. He's very perceptive, and he's probably one of the most perceptive people I've met for some time. He brings quite a colorful background to what he does, and he has knowledge in different fields. And he's also a practitioner of humility, whether he knows it or not, because he takes what he does very seriously, but he doesn't bring the same sort of gravity to himself. He's very easygoing and very relaxed.
Yeah, and he's quite intelligent. Some of his comments really make you sit back and think. And
yes, he's extremely
sometimes you have to dissect the the grammar as well, because he's intelligent, and some of the stuff he writes is above this little brain of mine. So here's another one. Cheryl posted this. I love David Amerland's post about the trolls. We do have a lot to learn.
Yes, we do. And I created that post after some thinking and a lot of research. I went back to conversations I've had over the last 2 years. And obviously I've had a lot of conversations over the last 2 years, but I focused on the ones which I found most difficult. And a pattern emerges. And the pattern was part of what I created there. But there's a follow-up to this. I actually am going to put another post because even that post created a certain amount of discussion, which got me thinking. There is never a final black and white, right or wrong here. Everything's part of an evolution. And I think we need to constantly be aware of this. And I'll be writing about this in the next couple of days. But essentially, we talk a lot about these days about tonal arguments, which essentially comes down to the way I say something, which then makes you respond to the way I said it rather than what I said. And although we would love everybody to be nice and polite, it's a very big world, and we have absolutely no knowledge of the person behind the screen, their circumstances, their history, and their experiences. They may have been on the receiving end of who knows what treatment. They may be going through whatever difficult patch themselves. And they're choosing to pick that moment to perhaps do something which we call trolling, but they're feeling very passionate about something, and they're expressing it in the only way that's available to them, whether it's by design or not. And I think if we really need to move forward from there, insisting that, hey, tell this to me in a nicer way, I think it becomes a little bit ridiculous because we're trying to shoehorn everybody into a mold we feel comfortable with, which takes me a little bit back to the earlier discussion we had about us, who are sort of veterans in G+, and the newcomers who are coming from Twitter and Facebook and other networks, and they're not so familiar with the culture. We can certainly lead by example, but I think to demand that people conform is contrary to the spirit we have of moving forward. And that's that's a follow-up. I think tonal arguments, they have really no place in G+. We have to accept the content, and if we can't find common ground on the content, then we just move on. We can, block the person, ignore them, and that's it. Conversation over.
Through this whole thing so far, I keep thinking about something, and I know I'm going to get home tonight, and Cheryl is not going to be happy that I say what I'm about to say. But anyone who knows her will understand how absolutely true this is. We need to ask ourselves when we're in these situations. I mean, if you want the greatest example personally that I've ever seen of humility, you need to sit back and go, what would Cheryl Deuce do? I mean, seriously, she will not engage with anyone. She has an absolute trust that everyone has good in them. I even asked her one time, we were having a conversation about this, and I said, well, okay, what about Hitler? And she's like, oh, but, his upbringing and, poor guy, and, his mom was a prostitute and all her clients were, Jewish businessmen and, yada, and I'm like, holy cow, you can defend Hitler? She can. Seriously, well, I do this all the time, but it wouldn't hurt.
I think she has a good point in that we really need to take the approach now that everybody matters or no one does. To sort of, get into a social network where we've had contact with people across the world and say, we sort of got together, we matter, and the others matter a little bit less. I think that just perpetuates everything that's wrong with the century we left behind. And we really need to find new ways of thinking and new ways of connecting. And I'm the first one to say it's not going to be easy. I struggle with this every day. And I struggle even more when I've been in a corporate environment, talking to people about G+ and business and the way we sort of create modalities. And then I get into G+ as a person, and I have to think way differently and do things in a sort of more open-minded way than I've advised a corporate entity to do, simply because for the corporate entity, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot longer for them to behave like that. because they are not even comfortable acting as with any kind of authenticity and transparency in this kind of environment. So, we have definitely a two-speed world. We sense the pressure, and we need to respond to that pressure and actually adapt and evolve. And it's really difficult, I admit that. But if we don't do it, the pixies won't do it for us. So it's up to us. We really need to do the hard thing, the uncomfortable thing, respond in ways that perhaps go contrary to our first knee-jerk reaction, and go from there.
It's about like humility, is about personal growth. And Dennis, what you said, I want to be like Cheryl now. I've always wanted to be broader than me, because it's so nice to see the big picture and not to take yourself as a bigger particle. You're as tiny as all other people around you. And the more grace and understanding you emit, the better the picture. So this is what Cheryl does.
Yes, it is. All right, so I'm going to do something a little different here for a second, bringing up a comment that I can't read. Theodora, can you help us out here?
Yeah, can you please share it?
Yep.
I can't read it.
Oh, you can't read it?
I mean, I can still, but I need it bigger.
White box on my camera.
Okay, you took the worst one.
Bottom part of it is not.
Okay, this is Петър Николов, who is saying, представяш ли си Милен Гълъбов по време на ХОА да демонстрира на котката червената точка? Okay, I'm starting to translate with first saying that even I don't understand the whole comment. So this is a friend of mine saying, imagine your boyfriend is coming and chasing your cat. That's it. This is because I wasn't sure whether my new cat will weigh in with a comment here. And they're making fun of me. That's it.
What are friends for then, eh?
Exactly, right?
Perfect.
I can guarantee you that my dog is not going to weigh in because I did not bring him to the college today.
Yeah, but I'm home. It's 10:20 here now.
Okay. So, well, thank you for staying up late. We really appreciate that.
Thank you for inviting me.
So here's another one. Kristen Drysdale says, just submitted answers, no quote though. What she's referring to here is our questionnaire, and I'm going to screen share up our questionnaire for a second. Here we go. Okay, so this was really interesting. When I put in this week the synonyms for the word humility, self-awareness was not on the list of synonyms that came up. I put that one in as my own thought, and yet it looks like everybody, I've never seen 100% answer, 11 out of 11.
That's a very interesting one.
Yeah. So, any thoughts on why that was so?
Well, yeah. I mean, in order to actually be humble, you need to be able to understand what you're good at, and then also understand the huge number of deficiencies that you have in anything you do. I mean, nobody can be perfect in everything. We can be very good at some things and incredibly good at other things. And then, the moment we step into any kind of social construct or any kind of social contact or even the G+ stream, there are people here that are incredibly talented and fantastically knowledgeable. And to think that you can outshine everybody all the time simply by being you, I mean, that's like, I think that should be the definition of madness.
Yeah, well, it actually is the definition of madness, because it would be thinking that you do the same thing and get a different outcome. I mean,
Yes.
literally, and that is Einstein's definition of insanity. So
Yeah, but you're not you all the time. You're dynamic.
that's
So
true.
your you is different. I have something for Kristen Drisdale.
Okay.
Awesome.
I just draw that because
With
she's always very kind.
She is. She's awesome.
Yeah, she is.
So there you go. Big hug from or love symbol from Theodora. All right. So some more of the stats this week. I'm going to share those up again. So we were more kind of spread out with the idea of the words that are the antithesis. So our number one was arrogance, number two was egoism, and number three was boldness. Confidence and pride didn't play in. I thought that was interesting. I thought this one was really interesting right here. The humility, is that something you use in your business? I'm one of the three people that answered 4. I don't know. This seems like one of those things where it's like what you were saying at the beginning, David, the difficulty of the conversation at hand. Do you always use humility? Well, I certainly could be more humble, but I can guarantee you that Cheryl is one of those 26 and deserves to be one of those 26. So I can't answer for anybody else in there, but thought that was interesting. We got a bunch of here. Are these are some older ones. Here we go. Here, this one's from David. There is no spoon. David, you crack me up.
That's very true, though, right? Because if we think that essentially what we think is real isn't, it's an illusion, and that usually comes to our own sense of achievement, then it gives us a sense of perspective. That it's a very fluid construct, who we are, and depends so much on many different factors we don't control. That to take pride in that, and take pride in a way that is essentially arrogant, is only hubris, really.
That's true. We talked a little bit, I'm going to unscreen share here. We talked a little bit in the green room about the book, The Tipping Point. And both Theodora and you, David, have brought up something that keeps reminding me of a section I was reading in the book last night. And that is the interesting variance in the concept that we are all a certain particular way. And there was a study done about the whole concept of first children, are powerful and these things, and then they get more creative as they get younger, middle kids and all this dynamic. What they found is that those things are true with the relationships inside of a family, and they're untrue everywhere else. So if you think about your own siblings and this typical first child, middle child, last child dynamic, then you're going to see the veracity of it and therefore extrapolate that out further. And yet those people go out into the world and they are who they are, and it goes to what Theodora was talking about, the fluidity of you were talking about, David, that we are who we are in different situations different, and that doesn't make us less honest the episode 2 weeks ago, less authentic, and often used Google Plus word. You know, we are who we are, but that changes. Theodora, I loved the use of the word fluid. That's exactly what comes to mind.
I didn't say fluid, but that's fine within the semantic world.
What did you say? I was sure you
I said dynamic, but fluid is perfect. Yes. Thanks.
Yes, okay, dynamic and fluid. David, are those semantic to each other?
They are actually, yes. Within physics they are.
Okay. Boy.
Fluids are essentially a dynamic environment.
But again, actually, right there, our reality, this is back to the spoon thing. Our reality is what we take in. You said dynamic, I interpreted fluid.
Yeah, but we understood each other perfectly.
Exactly. And I was convinced that fluid was the word that you used, which is probably what I internally heard. But again, there is no spoon. I mean, what is reality?
It's very subjective at times. And I think this is why, we're actually operating in a very different world to anything that's happened over the last 10 years. We have contact with people from different cultures. We talk to people sometimes in their own language using Google Translate. And a lot is lost in translation. A lot of the times we connect using English and it's not their first language. And we all have come from different cultures, different backgrounds. And there are different backgrounds and different contexts even within the same culture. Somebody from New York may have problems sometimes connecting with somebody from LA because their cultural experiences are different. And we're only talking about the USA here. So I think when we come up against this kind of dynamic environment, and it's global, it would be unrealistic to expect a homogeneity to take place. It's not going to. So really, we must learn to adapt to that. We must learn to find the commonalities that we share. And they have to become part of the dialogue. We have to develop new languages. We have to become proficient in new skill sets in order to progress. And all that does involve self-awareness. It does involve constant learning, experimentation, sharing, discussion. And that's how we grow as a corpus.
Yeah. Okay, so as you were talking about that, many people on the Plus know that I speak fluent Spanish. But as you were talking right now, I was thinking about who I am when I'm speaking Spanish. And I am literally a different person in so many ways. My sense of humor is different. A lot less puns in Spanish, though I still carry them over, which culturally is difficult for most of my Spanish-speaking friends to conceptualize. That's not normal humor within that language. I'm also far more amorous in Spanish than I am in English. Culturally, that's more accepted, and
more flirty, is it?
Pardon?
Are you more flirty?
In English, it would come across as being flirty. In Spanish, it comes across as being human.
Yes.
Right?
Fair enough. I know what you mean, actually, because, I was discussing this with a friend. Actually, Martin Shervington, he's in Brazil at the moment, and he's learning Portuguese. And he is experiencing the kind of cultural translation shock. And I was telling him how difficult it was when I was explaining. I lived in, not many people know this, but I lived in Russia for a year in 2007. And all my friends were Russian, though, we spoke English. And actually at the time I learned a little bit of Russian. Really difficult language. And I was explaining to them how difficult it was to actually translate the phrase "I see," which we use in Britain all the time. And you use this in a very disapproving manner sometimes, like "I see," But to them it wasn't. It's like, "Oh yeah, I can see this." He said, "No, it wasn't like that." So this is exactly the kind of thing. Each culture has its own character, and that character has there's a certain self-awareness of what the culture actually implies. And we are in the process of basically overcoming that. If we need to translate this into practicalities, we're being forced as individuals and as businesses working in a global environment to overcome the limitations of our nationality and our ethnicity and our national borders. And we're doing this while there still is a nationality and an ethnicity and a country which is defined by borders. So there you go. We sometimes have a strong sense of disconnect. There are real reasons for this, and we are experiencing the first pressure of the change that's hopefully coming for the next century.
Okay, so here we can see Yazin's intellect. This is basically a capsize of the extremely long explanation I gave. Language has a cultural blueprint. When we use it, we tend to behave and feel slightly in a different dynamic. That's exactly what I was attempting to say, but far more concise by Yazin.
Yassin speaks at least 3 languages, I think, if not 4. So he actually grasps that at a deeper level than perhaps you and I.
Yeah,
certainly.
So, Theodora, you have been awfully quiet. Give us some thoughts on the conversation so far. Jump in here.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same thing with the English writing. When I'm writing in English, I'm thinking in a different way. And since I have some more free time, for about 2 or 3 weeks, I started excelling my Russian, and I got back to studying Russian. And it's another thing. It's just different paradigms, and you're entering different mind castles, and you're expanding your thinking within the structures of the language you're using, and this makes you richer.
Mind castles. Holy cow.
Oh, you heard that right.
Just went.
What's wrong with me?
I can see why you're a writer. No, that was absolutely fantastic. It was unbelievably powerful to what you were saying, and just caused my brain to really grasp and start to process what you were saying. I never would have come up with the term mind castles, but that was awesome. You know what I'm saying, right, David?
Absolutely.
Yeah. She's looking at me like
No, I'm just taking the good vibes in.
Good. Okay. Glad you're taking the good vibes in, because that was really, for me, that was amazing. All right. So we're getting close to the 1 hour mark. So let's see. I'm going to take a look at the chart one more time here. So this is our season of movement. This has been on for a few weeks now, and it looks like movement is continuing to move and change. But we've got evolution at 8 and progress at 8. It's going to be fun to see how this changes over time, and we are taking snapshots a little at a time so we can chart this. Of course, keep in mind Stephanie Sims is a numbers geek, so she's really looking forward to diving into this. Learning from a couple of weeks back, we've got 15 for enlightenment, 12 for information. Honesty last week's, integrity. So that continues to just dominate and dominate and dominate. Keep filling this out, even though you may have filled these out for the previous week, because we really are trying to see what happens over time and see if we're going to delve into this even on an individual level and see if your own thoughts are changing and moving over time. So thank you for filling it out. It gives us a lot of interesting thoughts and insights into everyone.
It's a very interesting part of your HOAs.
Thank you.
This one, you're welcome.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I mean, all my HOAs, I try and have a little something odd in them, and that's the one we're doing here. And it's really fun to see people's interaction to the various words. Hopefully, it's not taking a lot of time from people, but we keep getting more people each week, so I don't think anyone's frustrated.
The word enlightenment was very powerful, and it's a very good parallel to what have happened before.
Mm-hmm. It is. So, okay. So let's close down some closing thoughts. We'll go ahead and we're going to do this in this order. David, I'm going to give you a minute to give your closing thoughts for today, and then anything that you want to promote, talk about, share somewhere you want, call to action. And then Theodora, we'll have you do the same, and then I'll close out the show. And unfortunately, we won't have Stephanie's closing thoughts this week.
Okay. We can do that. So, do we start? Do I start?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, we set out to look at humility in terms of how it should work in a business environment. We also discussed how it works in a very personal environment. Those two are linked. Essentially, businesses are people, and we're trying to humanize them so that human qualities come through them. Is there a pathway where a business can actually come across as being humble, expressing humility in what it does? Yes, there definitely is. One is self-awareness and good communication within the business. The second thing is essentially good communication with those the business comes into contact with, because that promotes both self-awareness and knowledge of its deficiencies. And the third thing is a constant willingness to adapt and evolve in ever-changing circumstances. And if that sounds like it is disruptive, it's because it is. Businesses today have to be prepared to be constantly disrupted. Those which can't disrupt themselves are going to find themselves being disrupted when they least expect to. And they will probably vanish and others will take their place. That also goes for individuals. We may not necessarily vanish as individuals, but certainly we can have a fall from grace. So it's good to remember that no matter how cool we are in what we do and how important what we do might be, at the end of the day, we're just tiny particles in a massive, massive sea. And what makes us good and what allows us to become great with inverted commas are the people we affect and how they affect us back. So if we operate with that in mind, keeping a very open-minded approach, however hard that might be, well, I can only see that we will get better at what we do without necessarily becoming egotistical or monomaniacal. And that's my closing thought.
Perfect. Anything you want to, anything you got coming up, something you want to share?
Well, I'm working on a couple of new books at the moment, but there's nothing to actually share about them. The first one is not due out until next year, about the end of the first quarter of next year. So I'll be talking about it as I'm sort of crystallizing some of the things which I'm writing about.
And there you go. On a show on humility, given the opportunity to self-promote, David doesn't do it. Theodora.
Okay, well, I would say that humility is the power and the power to surrender to change and to embrace and trust others, which I am learning. And that's it.
That's incredibly powerful. Yes, absolutely. You can see why I chose her.
Yeah, I can. And there's a whole lot of conversation going on about the conversation about mind castles, and people are trying to get her on Jess plus Scott plus you, and You've got, oh, there's a whole push behind you. I don't know if you've been watching the comments, Teodora, but yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, well, wait until after when you get back into the conversation. I'm going to go way out on a limb here, but David, you really have uncovered a fantastic wealth of knowledge for me. And even though I don't have Stephanie here, we have got to get you to come back, Teodora, as a superhero and let you select your sidekick. And so we will be looking through the words that are still not filled in and finding that place to fit you in. And I'll do my best to make the word associate to mind castles, which probably isn't going to be that difficult.
Okay. I liked enlightenment, though.
You liked enlightenment. All right. Well, we'll be reaching out to you
will
privately.
Practice humility and choose mind.
Also, I think it's really cool.
Well, hold on just a second. We've still got a couple of minutes here. I'm going to do something I've never done live on an HOA. Stephanie's probably just going, oh my gosh, you're doing what? Okay. So some of the words that are still coming up, we've got in the changing direction section that's coming up, we've still got stepping back and asking. The slowing down section, we've got letting go, enjoyment, happiness, and pleasure, which is actually our last show before the end of the season, and vision, change, developing a new focus. So those are episodes that are coming up. Did any of those jump out to you, Teodora?
What if I say no?
That's totally okay. We can always have you back for the next season. If any of those jumped out to anyone in the audience, love to hear your thoughts, because we are definitely a crowdsourced HOA here. So, but yeah, we will. We're definitely going to have you come back.
Yeah, I want back. I love the show, and I love the way you're following the flow, and you're really staying cool all the time.
Yeah, that's only in front.
Maybe that's because of your hat.
It's
you have something under it.
I loved that picture. She sent me a picture privately after we asked her of her. It's out there on Facebook, or I mean on Google Plus. In a
Armenian.
Yeah, is that Armenian? I loved that hat. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Yeah. Oh my goodness, we just lost her, David.
Oh, have we? Oh, yeah, she's gone. You're right.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can come back for just a second or two.
Let's hope. All right, so what do I have coming up? Minecraft. We're going to cover Minecraft on the Codebreakers show next Wednesday. Ammon Johns and Grizz is out in the audience right now, are putting that together. And last night I did something really interesting. I actually set up 3 computers in a room at a local library with 2 of my sons, and we talked about why they liked Minecraft, which you may want to see that in my personal feed. Kind of a bizarre show, but yeah, it's interesting to have a kid's perspective on an HOA.
Always, I think. It provides a fresh perspective.
Yes. Yep. So I think we're probably not going to be getting her back, which is unfortunate. But we will definitely get her back as a superhero on Network Roundtable.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, I've never done that before. And
Power of Hangouts, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's see. Griswold Grimm supposedly has some great idea. Oh, well, let's talk, Grizz. He says, I thought about asking to be on the one about asking.
Well, if you don't ask.
I love it. Thanks, Chris. You're a riot.
That's
Okay.
an existentialist comment, right?
Exactly. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. David, thank you so much again for being.
Thank you for the opportunity. I thought it was a really difficult subject and something which we need to cover and make part of the online conversation. Otherwise, we'll never address it, and it needs to be addressed. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I love having you on my shows. I always try and challenge you and push you out of talking about semantic search and into other areas of mind castles, I guess you could.
Yes, that's no problem at all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun to get your perspective on things that we don't normally hear from you. So thank you for joining us. And until next week, we'll see you all later. Stephanie, take care. Fly back safe, because I really need you next week. And next week, we actually have Gail Harris on, which is going to be really fun because she was on last season. We decided we wanted to have her back, and we're talking about wisdom next week.
Oh, wow.
Which is going to be really fitting because 2 nights ago, I finished Gail's newest book, Finding Zoe, and there is a definite tie between Finding Zoe and wisdom. So looking forward to that. We'll see you guys all next week. Thanks for joining us here on Network Roundtable.
Take care. Bye-bye.